I guess the interesting thing about me, I grew up in a family that I'm not Catholic. I was not born and raised Catholic. I was raised in a Southern Baptist church. My father was an alcoholic. My grandfather was an alcoholic. His wife was an alcoholic, not my grandmother, but his second wife was an alcoholic. So I dealt with that all the time, and my folks were separated when I was 14. And I had a sister younger and a brother and a sister. I had 3 siblings. Well, at 15, I left home, and I moved to a small town in northern Missouri and finished high school there. And then I met Joanne, my wife, when I was 18 years old. She was 17 and we were married. And at 17 and 18. And we've been married. It did work because we're just celebrating our 62nd anniversary now. So I often think, how did it work? And that's an interesting thing to me, having my grandparents were divorced, both sides. My parents were divorced. My sister's been divorced 3 times, was divorced 3 times. My brother twice. My other sister 4 times. You know, it just, and Joanne's family was the same way. Came from a divorced family. And we often ask ourselves, how did we make it?
Yeah.
How did we make it this long? What did we do different? And, you know, not being Catholic, we didn't make that commitment that, yeah, we're going to stay together the rest of our life that the church asked for. But we did. We still made it. And it was I think it was our faith that really did it for us. Joanne had always wanted to be a Catholic. Always. And I never, you know, no way as a Southern Baptist in Missouri. You don't even associate with Catholics.
Right.
And so there was nothing like that. And I often tell the story about my only association I ever had with the Catholic Church was when I was 15. I was in the Boy Scouts, and one of my friends in scouting was a Catholic. And we played and did, you know, went to camp and everything together. And his father died. And so I felt I had to go to the funeral because he was one of my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
So, but how do I go into a Catholic church without the Baptists seeing me doing it? Because it was really that way down there at that time. So I remember going into the church, and I'd never been in a Catholic church in my life. And of course, I know now, and you do too, bells were ringing and smoke was going and all kinds of things that I'd never seen before in my whole life. And they were not speaking in a language that I knew, because it was still Latin at that time.
Right, yeah.
It was before Vatican II. And I'll never forget, I think it's my first real encounter. I was on the very back row. I didn't want anybody to see me if I could avoid it. And 2 little old ladies came in front of me. And they genuflect. And they went in and they knelt down. And I was kind of watching them, what they were doing, to see if I was doing things right. And all of a sudden, both of them reached into their purses and took out Kleenexes and put them on top of their head. Well, now here I am, I have no idea. And I thought, what in the world? What are they putting those on their head for? That's all I could think about.
Yeah.
Well, finally, I figured it out. I figured it out towards the end of the Mass. I knew what that was for, because if they started crying, they wouldn't have to dig in their purses. They could just take the
Take it right
Kleenex.
out
And
there.
that's the only thing that made sense to me, why you put a
Convenience.
Kleenex on top of your
So
head.
makes sense.
Well, that was when women covered their heads when
Yeah.
they came into the church, and so that was my first encounter with the Catholic
That's
Church.
awesome.
But we just it was really interesting. Joanne always wanted to be Catholic, and I couldn't break over at that time. And we moved around in my job, and we were in Topeka, Kansas. I moved from Kansas City to Topeka, Kansas, and I was in the Optimist Club that worked with young men, young boys, and a bunch of the guys said, "Do you play softball?" I said, "Yeah, I've played some, not a lot. I play a lot of sports." And they said, "Well, how would you like to play on our church softball team?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to." "Well, you got to go to church there, though." And I said, oh, okay. Because church was not really in the center of our life at that time. But we had our 2 daughters there, and so it was an Episcopal church. And my wife was baptized Episcopalian. Both my daughters were baptized Episcopalian. My wife was confirmed in the Episcopal church. I was confirmed in the Episcopal church because I'd already been baptized. And so we became very active in the church, very active. And then we moved back to Kansas City. We were in a very small Episcopal parish, and they didn't have a lot of money. So my wife and I were the youth ministers for this parish. So we just moved right in and took that over. And then we moved to Des Moines, Iowa. And the bishop in Des Moines, Iowa, anyone knows the Episcopal Church, there was the high church and the low church. The low church only had the Eucharist maybe once a month, once a quarter. But the high church had it just like the Catholic Church, every weekend. And they truly believed that Christ is present in the Eucharist. So the Eucharist became very important to us in the Episcopal Church. Well, but the bishop up there didn't believe in the Eucharist. And that was the end of the Episcopal Church for us. Because the Eucharist meant that much to us, even as Episcopalians. So Joanne said, how would you like to go to the Catholic Church with me? And there was one right behind where we bought our home in Des Moines. I said, I don't know if the church could handle it. And so we went, and it was just after Vatican II, which gave a freshness to me. They answered some of the questions that I was having with the church. And they didn't have the RCIA at that time, so God love him, he was a great guy. But the Monsignor that we took our instruction from, he's dead, I think, now. But I almost slept through all of it. It was just so boring, just so boring.
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of tough. But then we moved up here to Minnesota, and we joined St. Gerard's out in Brooklyn Park, the church, and it was a post-Vatican II. I mean, it threw out everything of the church. And we joined that. I was very active, and that's where the folks came to me, some of the parishioners, and said, we really think you should think about becoming a deacon in the church. And I'm saying, this Baptist boy, a deacon in the Catholic Church? So I said, I'll think about it. And, I thought about it about that long. And probably 2 or 3 months later, another group came to me and said, Del, we really think you'd be a great deacon. And I thought, you're talking to me now, aren't you?
Yeah.
So I started praying about it and thinking about it. Joanne and I talked about it because the wife's very important in it, particularly the whole thing you're going through. And then when you serve as a deacon, there's going to be times you just have to leave her to do things for the church. And so we applied. We went over and went through the whole process, and I had to get my baptism certificate from a Baptist church and my confirmation from an Episcopal church, and I took those up and I said, well, here you go, good luck. And so lo and behold, we were accepted into the program along with 11 or 10 other guys and gals. And so at that time it was only a 3-year program. Now they're 5 years. So we went for 3 years and was ordained. What were we now? This is 40 years almost now ago. And I'm the only active deacon out of my class, out of the 9 that were finally ordained. The rest of them were older than I am. Some have already died. Right. It fell that way. And so I've been active up until, I'm still active. I'm just not active in a parish right now. Right. And Joanne and I talk a lot about that because that hurts. That was a big part of my life for 40 years almost. Yeah. And so I was very fortunate. People will talk to me about, I hear deacons say, they don't treat me right at that parish. The pastor he doesn't like me. He doesn't like, and my statement is, and if you're listening, deacons, I tell you, you know what? Maybe it's not the pastor, maybe it's you. Think about where the problem is, because I have been so fortunate. God has blessed me. I've been in 3 parishes in all those years, and every one of them, I have been blessed with some of the greatest priests to work with.
Yeah.
And that's hard to say, I know, sometimes, because some can be a little tough to work with. But I, well, people here, Father Tony,
Yeah.
he was tough to work with. And but every place I've been very fortunate. God's blessed me with that. And I've also had the opportunity. Our class was one of the first in the Archdiocese that really went through serving the poor and the needy. I mean, Father, our director of the program, he had us go through things that no other class went through. So when we were ordained, I remember we were planning our Mass at the cathedral, and I know it was me. I said, guys, people are going to want to know, what do we buy a deacon for a gift? A priest, you get a chalice, you get some of the things they need. And I said, why don't we do this? Why don't each of us select a charity that we want to work with and ask people to give money to the charity instead of us? Great idea, they said. And we put it in our invitation.
Oh, very cool.
Put it in our invitation. I think, if I remember the number right, there were 9 of us, and we collected over $12,000 for charities. Each of us got a different amount. And people just kept saying, ooh, that's hard to believe you did that.
Yeah.
But that's really what we're about. That's what deacons are. People don't understand. They always think the deacon's at the altar. And they are. We're at the altar a lot. And we do sacraments, some sacraments. But our role is, if you look at the scriptures, the deacons were put in there to help the disciples.
Okay.
Because they had too much on their hands.
Yeah.
And we were to take care of the widows and the orphans. If you look at the Acts of the Apostles, that's what deacons were told to do. So I've always been somebody that does that. I've worked with the poor ever since I was ordained. Always have. Started at Loaves and Fishes down at St. Stephen's here, and just continued when I went to Kansas City, and when I came back here, I was back at Opportunity Center working with the homeless.
Oh, okay.
And I've never, well, I'm not doing as much, but still, that was really the thrust of what my ministry was about. And I've always been active in Boy Scouts. Right now I'm the chaplain for the Archdiocese for Scouting.
Oh, wow.
So for the last 7 years, I've been helping the young men and now women, young ladies in Scouting, to get their religious emblems.
Yeah.
And so I spend a lot. We just did it 2 weeks ago with the Archbishop, and so that's been a big, important part of my life. And somebody said, "Well, how did your faith get so strong?" Well, I'm going to tell you, I had an uncle that was head of the Southern Baptist Sunday schools in the United States. He was a Baptist minister, one of the greatest men I've ever met. I don't care whether he's Baptist or what he was really a Christian man, and his faith was so strong. And he kind of, I picked up the things that he was saying and doing and how he treated people and cared about people. And so I had a pretty good mentor there. But I also say that a lot of mine came from Scouting, because the final Scout law is reverence, that you're reverence. And that was always with me. I got my religious emblems when I was in Scouting. I worked with young men ever since in the Catholic religious emblems. I do programs for them. We take them over to the seminary every year to kind of maybe hope that they might hear the call. And now we're going to have to start taking our young ladies in Scouting to a convent somewhere.
Yeah.
But we'll find something for them. But that's really kind of where mine started. It really started, was there. My faith was there. It just kept growing and growing. And It's been a great, great journey. It's been a great journey. I remember my ordination, and I'll never forget this. All my family was there, and they're all Baptists, sitting in the cathedral, right on the second row of all places, so people could see them. They had no idea what was happening, but they were just excited because they were excited for me.
For you.
Yeah, for me. And I remember Archbishop Roach. He was the Archbishop at that time. After we were ordained, he asked us to turn and face the people. And I'll never forget what he said. And I think, I've never heard it again except at our ordination. He said, "Deacons, here are your people you're here to serve." And then he said, "People, here are your deacons."
Yeah.
It hit. It hit. It was really strong. And so, it was a great experience.
What an adventure.
Oh, yes.
What do you miss about being in the churches?
Miss
Being in the churches,
the people.
the people.
The people. They say, "Gosh, you've done so much for people." I said, "You don't know how much you've done for me.
Oh.
You don't know how much you've done for me." I see the faith of the people. They're going out into the world. I can kind of hide in it with my, being a deacon. I can, get away with some things. But I look at the people, and I tell you, it's Father Tony and I have talked about this a lot. When you're sitting up front, when you're serving like he is as pastor or the celebrant, and I'm there as a deacon, people, even though we don't pay for our pews anymore, people sit in the same pews all the
Yeah,
time.
they do.
And you don't know how it affects us if somebody's not there at 10:30 or 8 o'clock or whatever. We think, what's happened? Are they sick? Are they?
Yeah.
You really do. It's just it's a family. They
Yeah.
were, and so that's what I miss are the people. I really do. We're going to a parish in Brooklyn Park now. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. It's just, we know some of the people, but we didn't want to go back to St. Gerard's. And we couldn't come out here. It's just so far to
far.
get out here for us. Joanne loves the parish out here.
Yeah.
She absolutely loves. She said if they would pick it up and move it. And, but no, that's the thing you miss are the people. So fortunate. So I would recommend any of you that are listening, particularly men, consider it. It's a great, great vocation. It's a great vocation. And, it's just, I found one thing that's interesting. When I finished working, when I retired, I was senior vice president of a large chemical company. And I found after I moved back to Kansas City, people were constantly from our company, and we were a big company, were coming to my door saying, "Hey, Del, can I talk to you for a minute?"
Oh.
I became their confessor almost.
Yeah.
They just felt that they could talk to me
Yep.
about not business, about personal
Themselves.
lives, how they're doing their family, their kids,
Yeah.
anything. And so the deacon is more than just at the church.
Yeah.
We are a deacon every place we go.
Yeah.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.